Back in 1996, Fatboy Slim said it best. Everybody needs a 303. We have three here. We're going to talk about them today. Hello, Internet. Chris Klein here with Alamo Music Center in San Antonio. And as I stated in the intro, we're going to look at 303s today. Of course, we're going to start with the original, the OG TB303 from Roland, the bass line. We're going to look at Cyclone Analogic's TT303, the bass bot, as well as Behringer's, which is the newest in this whole series, Behringer's TD3, which comes in all kinds of different flavors, different colors, and now they have an even more updated version. The 303 has a really interesting history. We're not going to get too deep into the history because I want to listen to these. We want to listen to these. The 303 came out in 1981. They made approximately 10,000, Roland did, and it failed pretty miserably upon its release because it was supposed to take the place of a bass guitarist. Now, we all know that this does not sound like a bass guitar. And even paired with its original counterpart, the 606, that's not really the best backing band ever. But if you want to make acid house music, electronic music, new beat, any number of electronic genres, this is kind of like the stepping stone, especially when we're talking about acid house. Again, not too much history, but just a little bit. Its real first foray into techno or dance music was actually on a 1982 piece called 10 Ragas for Synthesizer. Charanjit Singh was the composer, and if I'm not mistaken, he wrote a lot of music for Bollywood, but he created this electronic disco Indian music that featured the 303 heavily. And a lot of people will say, historians, music historians, electronic musicians will say that was the first like real proper use of the 303. Proper in that it wasn't intended to be a replacement for a bass guitar, but it was to create a groove and a really, really cool pulsating bass line for electronic music. After that, the next big commercial use for it was with a Scottish band called Orange Juice. And their single, oh gosh, it has just escaped my brain, and I have it here in front of me, so I'm going to look at my computer. Rip It Up. It used the 303 as its bass line, and it was real punchy and a lot of fun, and it actually charted in the UK. I believe it was a top 10 single. But it wasn't until 1987 when a couple of DJs that called themselves Future released a song called Acid Tracks. And they used a 303 and a Roland 707, which I'm pretty sure Zach has covered before, as their rhythm machines, and basically invented acid house music. And from there, all this music started coming out. And you know, in 1987, I was 14 years old. I'm going to date myself. And fortunately for me, maybe it wasn't my mother's best decision, I started hitting clubs when I was 14. I was going to dance clubs when I was a kid, like before I could drive, before I even had my learner's permit. And I was being exposed to stuff like Future and groups like S Express and Edwards and Armani, like all this new beat stuff that was coming out of Belgium and other parts of Europe, as well as what was coming out of the UK. And then we started hearing bands like Technotronic, and then, you know, Fatboy Slim brings it back to life in 1996, and it never really went away. But at that point in time, when this came out, the 303, its original price was $395. And once again, it failed. And a lot of people kind of ignored it, except for the acid house people, the electronic musicians. And there was a period when you could buy an OG 303 from anywhere from like $50 to $100. Today, if you want to get an OG 303, you're probably looking at $3,000 to $5,000. And so that's why we want to introduce these. And Roland actually has a newer version that it's an emulation, not a clone, that uses their ACB, analog circuit behavior algorithms to produce 303 type tones. It is the TB03. It's very similar in its form factor and its size, but it's not an analog counterpart. These are all analog. So I want to be sure that we understand that when we're talking about these here, these two in particular, these are clones that are using very, very similar analog circuitry, okay? So let's move on to each of these units and discuss the salient differences briefly, because we want to jump into the demos and hear how these sound. Cool? So let's start with the original, the OG, the TB303 from Roland. Now, all three of these devices, once again, are analog. These are clones, but they do share one thing in common, and that is how we program these devices, how we sequence them. And I'm going to tell you, and most other people are going to tell you the same thing, the way that you sequence or program patterns on these boxes, it's clunky. It is a pain in the butt. But I think that that is part, and this is my own opinion, we all have opinions, I think that's part of the charm of these boxes, because if you don't really have an understanding of musical theory and you can't write the pattern out in your head or on paper, it might become a process of trial and error where you're just pressing buttons. And then you get these crazy, weird, squelchy acid grooves, right? It really is clunky. You would have thought that they would have improved on this even when Roland introduced their boutique version, but they really didn't, right? Now, with this device having been made in 1981, you don't have MIDI. So if you want to sync this device, you have to use what is called DIN sync. And there are companies that have boxes, Kenton in particular, that have a MIDI to DIN sync converter. Now, another option you have with the 303 is you have CV and gate out. So you can actually spit your clock out, in a sense, and you can sync to other devices or other devices that also incorporate DIN sync. It's a really interesting sound, and it's not for everybody. And once again, if you try to use it for its original purpose to replace a bass guitar, you are going to be so disappointed, because that is not the right use for this box. Or maybe it is for whatever you're trying to do. Again, that's an opinion. But the consensus tends to say that this is made for acid house and dance music, and it sounds glorious. You have two waveforms. You have sawtooth and square. This is switchable on the back of this device, right? So there's really only one oscillator with two different waveforms that you can select between. And then you have all your controls to operate the sequencer, tempo, volume, and tuning. So you have to tune this. It is an analog device, so you have to tune it to a pitch. It may drift a little bit. Some of these other boxes differ just slightly. And then you have, of course, your modulation, resonance, or envelope modulation. You also have your decay and the way you can control the accent. So using the accent in your sequence is going to change the way that it's going to resonate and open up and the way that the box responds. And that's where you get these really, really cool, syrupy, slidey, acid house, trancy sounds. It's such a fun box. It's one of my favorite boxes in the whole world. So what we want to do is we want to listen to this now. And we're going to listen to all three. And for this first demo, or for these first three demos, I'm going to program the same sequence into each box. And I'm going to try to manipulate them the same way. So you can listen to how they sound sonically, how they differ, and then leave comments for us, right? So let's go ahead and start with the classic, the OG, the TB303. So next up, we want to listen to Cyclone Analogic's version, the TT303, or the bass bot. When this first came out, they put it in the same box. I mean, it was identical to the original TB303. Now this box is slightly newer. This is the Mark II. The original was called the Mark I. There's some other changes that have happened in the software over the years as well, because this is software controlled. Analog circuit though. Let's be sure that we're on the same page there. The differences sonically between these two, for me, to my ears, is negligible, right? Where this changes sonically is that you can actually get a little more out of the modulation and the filter. You've got a greater extension, which can lead to different harmonic combinations that you're not necessarily going to hear in the 303. Are we all going to hear this? I don't know. Hearing is so subjective, right? I don't know what you're hearing when I'm tweaking this or tweaking this or tweaking this. That's up to you to decide. Now, the other major difference with Cyclones is now you have MIDI in and out. On the back, you have a filter in. So you can actually take another device and plug into this filter and get all the juicy filter distortion and the harmonics out of it with a drum machine or a vocal or what, I mean, it's whatever you want to plug into it, right? So you have those options, which is really, really nice, right? And I should go back to this. You have a CV and gate out on here too. And I mentioned that briefly, which means you can plug this into, maybe you have a modular rig or whatever. These also offer that option as well, CV gate out, which is a nice option if you want to control other things that don't have MIDI or DIN sync or whatever. But getting back to this, the other major upgrade is the sequencer. Now, if you want to program a sequence from the ground up, it's still going to be the same process as the original TB303, which once again can be a pain in the butt, but it's kind of the charm. But after you do that, you can actually manipulate the sequence on the fly by randomizing it, by looping and changing parameters in the sequence with relative ease. And that's not necessarily the case with the original TB303. The other great thing about Cyclone's product, where, you know, if you want one of these, I get it. Like, I like to have OG devices too in my setup at home. But I can get this right now brand new for $299. We don't carry this product, but you can find it all over the web, Reverb or wherever. It's such a cool box. So the sound is nearly identical, except for having a little more range on the filter and modulation. And then you remember, you can go into the filter, and I'm looking down because I'm pointing to it, and we'll have some B-roll so you can actually see, you know, what I'm doing here, what I'm pointing at, and a couple of other options on the back as well, which I'm not going to get into. But the sequencer is definitely more robust and gives you more options, even though when you're programming something new, it's going to be the same process as the original. I think that's part of the charm, because sometimes I get on it and I'm not thinking from a musical theory standpoint. I'm just thinking, I want to do something right now. I start pressing buttons, and then, you know, maybe 2 times out of 5, I'm like, that's pretty cool. I can use this for something, right? And just get lost in my own world. So let's go ahead and listen to Cyclone's version, the clone of Roland's TB303. So next up in our lineup is Behringer's TD3. This is the AM edition. It's got this crazy yellow tint to it with the smiley face, and that kind of harkens back to the beginning of Acid House. It was the whole thing, right? The color scheme and the smiley face, and you're staying up really late. TD3 AM edition. It's 2:30 in the morning. You're still going off, and you're getting into the Acid House jams. That's where this whole thing came from. Make no mistake, once again, the sequencer, it's a pain in the butt, but charming. I think it's charming. You might think it's just solely a pain in the butt. Whatever. Now, once again, it kind of has the same feel as Roland's. They've moved some knobs over a little bit, and the knobs kind of extend out a little bit more than they do on the 303, which is nice. On this one, the knobs are bigger or wider. They have a greater circumference, which is really, really great. But this gives you additional options just like Cyclone Analogics. Once again, we have MIDI. This time we also have MIDI over USB. And where the sequencer on this is just like the sequencer on here, Behringer actually has a synth application or a synth tool that you can connect to this device, and you can write bass lines via a piano roll, which is kind of nice. So if you want to go and do things like that, you can. And also with both of these, having MIDI in and out, if you just want to run a 5-pin MIDI cable in and sequence off of something else and not deal with the sequencer on here, you can do that as well. It's definitely an option. Now, another thing that Behringer offers with this device is it comes with distortion. And in a lot of songs, tracks that incorporate the 303, think, well, we'll go back to Fatboy Slim or Daft Punk. Daft Punk is a great example. A lot of these cats, I always feel weird saying that, they'll take the output of their 303 and plug it into a distortion pedal. I know that the Ibanez Tube Screamer was a big favorite for people, but they have their own distortion circuit on here, which apparently is based off of one of the Boss circuits. I'm not quite sure which one. They could have made it a little more exciting, but they built it right into the box, right? So now you have distortion in here, which takes the squelchiness, the way the harmonics are being manipulated when you start messing with the envelope and the cutoff, to a whole different level. And it makes it really, really exciting. I honestly think that the distortion on here is not too bad. You're going to find other people online that are going to complain about it because that's just a thing, right? But this is not bad, and they incorporated that circuit directly into the box, which is super, super handy. You also have, once again, greater inputs and outputs, where the original 303, you got DIN sync, and then you have CV and gate out. Well, here we can access our filter again. We have sync in, and then of course we have CV out and gate out once again. It's a really cool box. And you know, where this one's right at about $300, you can find these online right now for about $109, right? As opposed to the 3 to 5K, 300, 109, which means you can have 2 or 3 of these and you can get crazy and create all kinds of crazy patterns, counter melodies that are going to happen with your bass line, or just do nothing but Behringer TD3s. And you can polychain them too. I think you can polychain up to 16 of these, which is a little ridiculous, but it can be done. So let's listen to what this one sounds like. So now that we've heard all three with similar patterns, with the same patterns, what I want to do is I'm going to hook all three of these up together, and I'm going to record a pattern, 3 patterns, that are going to come out of your speakers, center, left, and right. And so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to introduce the TB303, the original OG bass line from Roland. It's going to come up the center, right? And then I'm going to slowly bring in the TT03, the bass bot, into the left channel, okay? And then I'm going to slowly bring in Behringer's TD3 into the right channel. I'm also going to use one of my Cyclone drum machines as well, which emulates Roland CR78. So there's a little more rhythm driving everything. We're not just listening to 3 bass machines go crazy. But I'm going to show you how you can use these not just to create bass lines, but you can also use them to create melody as well, because it's a synth. And by putting bass on it, I think that we sometimes psychologically we limit ourselves and think, oh, well, it's only a bass machine. Well, no, we can use it for melody as well. So I'm going to once again incorporate all 3 machines, center, left, and right. They're going to come in independently from each other, so you can hear the sequence and the progression grow. Just to give you an idea of where we can take these. Cool? Let's take a listen. So here's the final demo. And this is going to be really, really interactive. It's going to be a contest for you, if you will. What I'm going to do is I'm going to program different sequences into each machine, going to play them back, but we're not going to let you know which machine you're listening to. Now, if you paid attention to me, there might be some clues, like I might have distortion on. That's happening here, because I'm not going to do anything else in post. I'm not going to add any effects, right? So you might hear distortion. Well, you know that's what you're hearing, right? Or maybe the filter gets a little more crazy. Well, you're probably hearing this. Or maybe the sequence changes really, really fast. It's a good chance you're listening to this one, right? If it's a very, very static sequence, and you just hear me sweeping filters and maybe playing with the accent, it's probably the 303, right? But I'm going to have some sequences on there where I'm not doing a whole lot with these two as far as the added functionality. So that might make it a little more difficult to discern which one you're listening to at that point. The first person that can guess all the sequences paired with the proper machine, we're going to give you a $100 gift card, but you've got to participate, right? So let's start listening to these sequences, and then you can chime in after the fact. Cool? Let's go. So there we go. We've listened to a lot of 303 content, and hopefully those of you that want to participate, I wish you all luck. You do also need to be subscribed to the channel. We can tell if that's happening or not. So just commenting, even if you get it right and you're not subscribed, we're not going to award you that gift card. But if you are subscribed and you guess every single device or the pairing of the device with the clip, then you're going to get a $100 gift card. And the first person to do that is going to win. With that being said, I hope you know a little more about these machines now, about the history of the 303, some of the songs that I've mentioned or the artists that I mentioned. Seek them out and listen to them. They're all available online. It's very easy to find this content. And if you own a 303, please, or a clone, or an emulation, a Roland Boutique or something in the box, let us know how you feel about your 303, because there are other clones out there as well, or your emulation versus what you've heard today. That's it for this one. This one was a lot of fun, and I'm really, really anxious to hear your feedback and see your comments. Once again, if you have not subscribed to our channel, please do. Just click on the subscribe button. We also have other channels: guitar, piano, accordion, bass. We're pumping out lots of content for you so you can be better informed. We try to keep it as unbiased as possible. It can be a little difficult to do that at times because we're all very passionate about what we do here, but we want you to form your own opinions on these devices and really use your ears and try to figure out what's happening and just what sounds really, really great to you. So with that being said, Chris Klein, Alamo Music Center in San Antonio. We're going to be back. Create, be good to each other, love each other, be kind, and we will see you again soon. Thanks a lot.